Hi, finger transformation, and what I want to explore today a little bit is movement patterns that we can do to facilitate better movement through our hips and our glutes. So what I'm first going to demonstrate is why I could be doing this on the floor too. So I'm going to put this knee in a bend. I'm going to get my hips kind of flat, if you will. I'm going to bring this leg as straight as I can. So my hamstrings are tight, so they're going to restrict me a little bit here. And I'm going to bring this leg as far over as I can, trying to keep my shoulder blades on the ground. So I'm going to get a stretch here. So I even notice my left leg tends to externally rotate. So that's my glutes, okay, pulling that out. I want to try and rotate it in as best I can. And now I'm going to come back up. Again, I want to keep my core pulled in and tight as best I can for this. Again, I'm trying to stretch the hip, make sure I turn the knee, internally rotate, get that stretch, coming back up. Now, as best I can, I want to keep my foot in a dorsiflex position to promote that lengthening of the gastroc and the hamstring. Now I can, if I need a little bit of help, I can push with my opposite glute. Rotate that in, I can feel it out a little bit. This is where kind of video recording or, again, watching what's happening. The other thing is I should be able to have my head back in a neutral position relatively comfortably, okay? If you don't, you can put something underneath the head to kind of help out. Also, when doing this, just try and come as, maybe you might only be comfortable coming this far. So you might want to work on stretching that a little bit. Because again, what happens is, the reason you don't want to come further, part of that is your tightness, part of that is fear of not being able to get back out of that motion pattern. That's what we're not realizing all too often, is our fear factor of when we're exercising, it's contributing to us not to be able to move. Now I'm going to switch to the other side. Okay, legs up straight. This one I do much better with my internal rotation. My harder part is getting this leg back out. And these are good things that you want to kind of take into consideration when you're exercising or moving. One way is going to feel easier on one side, and the other way is going to feel harder on the other side. So my right one has been getting internally rotated for years. It's kind of why I came up with this movement pattern to start stretching my glute to get this to abduct much better. When I'm coming down too, I'm trying to decelerate as best I can with my glute. Okay. When I'm coming down, now this would be really good if you had somebody kind of pushing, or you could push just a little bit, add a little bit of resistance. Okay. Flip that back around. Now what I'm going to work on this one is internal rotation, external rotation, internal rotation, external rotation. Internal, external. And I'm going to try and get my back flat. So again, I'm working my spinal flexion here. Or rotation out. And the rotation is from the hip. What happens all too often, I realize with a lot of us, myself included, we tend to do a lot of the rotating from the foot or the knee, not so much from the hips. This is why I want to keep that leg in a straight position as best I can, and force that rotation to happen from the hip. A lot of times in life we can cheat with the tibia and fibula that allows that rotation. So these are new exercises for me too that I've been trying to figure out the best ways that I can start to stretch my hips out and work them in angles that I normally wouldn't, doing, let's say, squats, lunges, things like that. So this is all to promote better hip movement. Getting core tight. Get my shoulders back, flat on the ground, and rotate. Right, much choppier with that external rotation. So I would suggest running that 3 times as best you can, each movement pattern, right, left, internal rotation, a deduction. One more time here. Go across, go from here, shoulder blades back, core tight, coming up. Trying to keep that leg dorsiflex. Just to about neutral, so my hips are on the ground. Again, I can feel my hip coming up too on this. So I want to try and keep it depressed as much as I can. So I might run maybe a little bit lower angle this time. So I'm going to run it down here. And that's the other thing we want to do, is play around with the angles. Okay, so I'm taking a less angle here, where here I'm taking a bigger angle. But most likely my QL is going to kind of come in or hike that hip up a little bit for me. So I'm going to take this one, I'm going to run it a little bit low. Add a little bit of pressure. Trying to keep that knee internally rotated. Much harder on this side to keep this one internally rotated. Start to feel any pain or discomfort, then just switch into the next movement pattern. So I notice this one's harder for me. That's the big thing when you're exercising, is trying to hit all your angles. And too often I realize I kind of fell into some bad habits of not working all my angles. This is why I'm coming up with kind of smaller, big movement patterns that facilitate this. Because I realize it's our inflexibility that stops us. I gotta get bigger on this motion. There we go. That's helpful if you have somebody to kind of help add that weight. I can feel myself cheating with this side too. Yeah. My adductors want to come in really bad on this. You can feel them. Which I knew I had hip problems with this. That's why my hamstrings have gotten tight over the years. Because my adductors started twisting it in too much, forcing more pressure on the inside, these adductors. And, the funny part is, you would think I'm not too bad here. Okay, I got flexibility to do this, but I can feel the tightness here. And that's also too, my hip is hiked up. My hip, should be down. And now I have a harder time getting into this stretch. Now I can feel that tightness on that inside hamstring. This is what sometimes we're not realizing when we're stretching too, is that maybe I cheat a little bit. Okay, bring this hip up. Now I get a better angle. So these small little kind of nuances, if you will, change. So I'm going to run that same one, but I'm going to run it down here and to work that rotation. Really try and externally rotate it. Dorsiflex that foot. So I dorsiflex and feel that tightness right up into that hip. This is kind of what happens sometimes with your fascia lines. They don't really care about muscles. They travel the whole distance and then some. This is kind of what gives you your muscle memory in a lot of ways. These fascia lines. And that's kind of what happens with their bodies over time. They develop just patterns that they're comfortable and used to doing. So the more you do them, the more comfortable they start to get. So like this one, I can rotate out better. And I have to play around with an idea of how I can get that hip. There we go. So I take my fingers and I put it right on my hip bone. I don't let it internally rotate too much. So now that exercise went from easy to hard. Because now it's just, for the most part, glute. Can't cheat with throwing my hip, my whole body and leg into it because I'm stabilizing at that hip bone. feels. Much better. I like those movement patterns. I'd also recommend stretching percussion with this. So I did it a bunch yesterday, so it's allowed me to probably get better range of motion. But I realize after every exercise, this is where I'd want to loosen it to. So I might come into this, get back into that stretch. Work on stretching a little bit more. Again, I'm noticing I'm overusing up here. So this would be TFL, fascia lateralis. But it's also because my glute or my hip is so tight that it's forcing these muscles to work. So I gotta get this hip, there we go, down and back. And all up and through here. So your glutes travel all the way up. A little bit past your, right up into the pant line, I guess would be the best way to explain it. Unless you have your hands like vertical, I guess. Let your glutes swoop all the way down. That's a big, that's not bone. A lot of us are mistaking a lot of this stuff for bone. That's just a big, keeping scar tissue there. And this is what forced me for my hamstring to come in more and more over the years. And I can see it on everybody. Now, if you look at your knee joint, you'll notice that there's more hamstring going to the inside than the outside. And whatever the tightest muscle is, that's what's doing the work. And all too often through a movement pattern, certain muscles are supposed to pick it up and start working harder. And certain ones should be working the whole movement. But if the muscles are too tight, which are restricting us, we're going to feel weak. So our body's going to find a different way to do it. And that's how we can get tighter and tighter. As long as you're moving, you'll tend to feel, always like you're gaining strength. But you don't realize, and I didn't realize for years that my ankles were getting worse. I was having a harder time. And I was getting stronger, but I was getting tighter all at the same time. That's why when people kind of hit me in their 50s and 60s, start running into more problems. Because now our muscles are really tight. We've been doing the same movement patterns for years. Also because we're just not stretching enough. I didn't know I was not stretching at all like I should have. And that's why I started to develop percussion therapy and realized it's the only way we can actually move fascia permanently. And then if we combine that with exercising and stretching, you get even more out of it. I'm going to show the right side for now, but so now I can feel again my hamstring. So now I can start to loosen that hamstring a little bit too. My hips in a little bit different position. But I got to keep stretching that hamstring. That thing has gotten so tight over the years, and that's what's forcing my hip to take a bad angle. So this pulls in, forces my glute to have to kind of internally rotate too much, and the outside stirrup muscle calves get too tight. It's this kind of domino effect that keeps repeating itself over time. And a lot of times, unless we don't have any pain, we don't really notice it, because we don't notice these small changes happening over time. But the more we kind of become aware of our body, our angles, how well we can do a motion pattern and all these things, the better we're going to start to understand it. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and look forward to making another.